in this presentation, I want to talk about moving from the picture on the corner, which is the Leh landfill, the Leh dump, to women basically helping to ban polythene bags. So for this presentation, I'm defining waste as material which is not meaningfully or safely recirculated in social or biological cycles. And by that definition, waste is a really new phenomenon in Ladakh and India, of course. Only a couple of decades ago, there was no waste as such. Many languages didn't even have a word for waste, as in the modern sense. So I'm going to be giving a lot of statistics. I don't expect anyone to remember them, but if you want copies of this show after, then, and I can also give references to where these figures came from. We know we're facing a waste crisis on a global scale today. You know, the oceans are now full of waste. We have 60 parts of plastic in the ocean for every one plankton. 94% of seabirds in the North Sea are having plastic inside them. A court case brought in Delhi found 52 kgs of plastic in cows and even in wild animals in India. Plastic has been found in the stomachs. So plastic is now becoming ubiquitous in the environment. Plastic consumption in India is increasing very, very quickly in recent decades, especially. And I'll get back to this later in the show, especially since the liberalization of the Indian economy and the increasing presence of companies with packaged foods. We've seen consumption of plastic in India increasing precipitously. Also the growth of the plastic industry. So, the plastic industry predicts that the per capita consumption of plastic in India will start to approach Western levels of plastic consumption in the next couple of decades. And that's what they hope for. This is in Delhi, I think. Delhi produces 9,000 tons of waste per day, which is about 2,000 trucks of garbage daily. That's predicted to go up to 15,000 tons per day in 2020. It's not just the big cities. This is in Himachal Pradesh in a village. This is a nala, which used to be clean water, and now that's where the waste is dumped.
In the village?
Yes. Bir. It's called Bir. So on a global scale, we have the same trend happening. The plastic production and consumption is increasing very dramatically. 300 million tons of plastic produced every year, and fully 2/3 of that is for packaging. That is material which is intended to be used once and thrown. The US, with less than 5% of global population, produces 20% of the world's waste. So the impression that the waste problem has been solved in the West because you don't see litter there is a mistake. The West has really perfected the art of hiding waste, but it produces the most per person. This is a landfill in New York called Fresh Kill's, largest one in the world. And here we are back in Leh. This picture we took a few years ago of where all those plastic bottles go to, that same dump. Ledeg and Borda did a study 2011 finding that something like 30,000 bottles per day were being generated as waste. And that's 2011. Today it'll have grown. Borda and Ledeg. They also found that 60% of tourists consume only packaged water. They don't refill. So, and then of course, on a global scale, 2.7 million tons of plastic are used just to bottle water. And of course, the effects of this are not just on the waste side. The companies who are bottling water are causing social and environmental conflicts around India, where they extract the water from, both to produce packaged water as well as soft drinks. So in Kerala and Uttar Pradesh, in many states of India, you have environmental social conflicts around water extraction. The other way of managing waste these days is burning it openly, one of them. And of course, we know that produces toxic ash and smoke. And the ash is one we don't think about as much. The smoke, of course, is carcinogenic, can be, but the ash also has to be dealt with. Now, if we ask what's really driving this, the mainstream diagnosis tend to be litter bugs, people littering, lack of dustbins, a lack of recycling. But in this, I'm going to actually question this diagnosis. So the first, the littering problem is really what drives the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan campaign of the government today, which is basically all about making spaces neat and clean by sweeping up the garbage and putting it somewhere. But it says nothing about the generation of waste and packaging. Times of India has a campaign to make dustbins beautiful so people will use them. Again, this doesn't address the generation of waste. So I'm proposing that the reasons why plastic waste is really increasing are these three. First one, the expansion of the plastics industry, which is supported by official policy. Second is the globalization of transnational food and beverage corporations. And I'll get into each of these as we go. And finally, the spread of materialist values through this kind of consumer culture, the media environment, which is really going kind of hand in hand with the spread of these transnational food and beverage companies. So, this is the neat and clean policy of the government of India, which is every 5-year plan contains thousands of crores of rupees of subsidies to expand petrochemical complexes and ramp up production of plastics in the country. And they're very open about the need for India's per capita consumption of plastics to increase. It's not enough today. So however bad the garbage situation is today, the plastics industry wants to double that. These are just a few examples, the government funding plastic parks. Gujarat, where the Prime Minister is from, with his Swachh Bharat Abhiyan campaign, is actually, giving out tons of subsidies, tax breaks, allocating land to build new plastic factories, to produce more of the packaging, which becomes our waste problem. Okay. Some statistics about Gujarat is really the center of the plastics industry and many other petrochemical industries, but this is where plastics come from in India, many of them. And look at the quote at the bottom. We have a target to double the polymer consumption within the next 5 years. This is from someone from the plastic industry called Plast India Foundation. They want to double the consumption of disposable plastics. So again, however bad it is today, the vision of the industry is to make it that much more. And this is part of the cycle of waste we don't think about as much as the waste. This is where it comes from. This is in Ankleshwar, the most polluted place in India, according to one study. So producing plastic also creates a huge pollution burden in the places where it comes from. If anyone's been here, you'll know that it's a real dystopia. Has anyone been there? Yeah. Ashish.
I don't intend going back.
So this is quite interesting. This is the national chemical policy of the Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers. Their intention also is to promote the sustainable development of the chemical sector. Now that's an interesting use of the term sustainable development, isn't it? So that's something when we use sustainable development, normally we mean a very different thing. They want to sustain the development of the industry. Of course, the largest private company in India is Reliance, and they're also the largest plastic producer, owned by the 4th richest man in the world. So this is also related to what Ashish was talking about with economic power and inequality. Someone with a 27-story house in Bombay is also partly wealthy because of this packaging industry. Now, this a lot of text there, sorry for that, but I think it's quite important to to look at these trends that are happening on a global scale, and this is the sort of globalization of the packaged food industry, also the fast food industry. Since economic liberalization, which occurred in the early 90s in India, and this is true around the world, this sort of what's called the neoliberal era, you've had, however fast the economy has been growing, what Ashish talked about, the growth of foreign direct investment, that is, foreign companies entering the market, has grown even faster than that. And a lot of that investment has been by these transnational food and beverage companies like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Nestle, etc. Okay, so that trend has been happening. We know that as globalization has been increasing, the consumption, so the saturation of different markets with these products has increased, and naturally, unsurprisingly, the consumption of these products has gone up hugely. Countries which signed free trade treaties with the USA have experienced 63% increase in consumption of soft drinks since those free trade treaties. In Mexico, you've had this enormous expansion of the consumption of soft drinks, some 1,200% or something, since the signing of NAFTA, this North American Free Trade Agreement. And the consequence, you can see, global sale of packaged foods jumped more than 90% in this last decade. And soda sales have more than doubled in that same time. So what we're really looking at in the last decade, the spread, the sort of global spread of packaged products has gone up dramatically, like almost exponentially. Potato chips, you can see the figures there of the quantity of sales is really increasing. So this is from an article which I can send the link to if anyone wants. A UN expert called for global regulation of this kind of food, because all those trends are also linked to the other side of the health consequences of the expansion of this industry have been what's called the diet-related non-communicable disease crisis. Okay, so everywhere around the world now we see diet-related diseases and this nutrition transition spreading. So things like diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, and obesity and overweight. Wherever we see trade like this liberalized economy, we see these health effects connected to this phenomenon of companies. So if tobacco has been regulated, as it has in many countries, shouldn't it also be the case if this is a public health crisis connected to these foods? Then one can start to conceive of the need for regulating this industry too. Now, Rigzin is not here, but I understand that in Nubra cigarettes are banned. Does anyone know if that's true? Anyway, if it's true, and Sabu yesterday they told us they're controlling cigarettes and alcohol, but those aren't the only things which harm public health. Now we have junk food. Yeah. So this is just a map of the control of this system. A handful of companies, about 10 corporations, are in the last couple of decades have started to consolidate the entire, junk food industry. So you have this cluster of companies. Unfortunately, you can't see the little lines showing who owns who. But all these different brands which make you think that there's a big diversity of products are actually owned by about 10 giant corporations. And this is in some ways a map of the waste problem too, because when you go and look through the waste, you'll see these are the brands on all of the packages, by and large. Of the top 100 food corporations in the world today, the top 10 of those control 35% of the sales of all the foods. So that gives a sense of the power and the real concentration of control of what's being sold and marketed around the world, and for the purpose of this discussion, what's related to the waste problem, plastic waste. So what I'm trying to say is this food company globalization, the plastic industry growth, and the spread of consumerism are all connected. So the waste problem and the health problem are one and the same. They're two sides of the same problem. And this translates into this kind of stock going into our shops today. This is in Leh Bazaar. This is before it goes to the shop, after it'll come out as waste, right? And it's going into our kids' mouths. This is a new phenomenon. 10 years ago, I never saw Ladakhi kids having Lays and Mountain Dew. Today, if you go on the bus to Sham, everyone stops in Nimu and comes back with Lays and Mountain Dew. That's new. And of course, these are familiar sights from Leh. Here we have American-style packaging as well as food. Again, remember that map I showed you of the companies? Here is in Leh, Coke and Pepsi, Maaza, Mountain Dew, Kinley, only missing Dasani. And then we have the water, the soft drink, and the food, all being consolidated by a handful of big companies. Okay. Now, when presented with this, recycling is often presented as the technical solution. I think there's a place for recycling, but I think it's also worth noting that recycling has its drawbacks too. This was an expose done last year. A lot of the plastic waste from the USA and Europe goes to China for recycling, supposedly. But this article came out in The Guardian. Plastic poverty and pollution in China's recycling dead zone. So this is where plastic gets recycled, and it's an ecological disaster. That's what it looks like in the backyard of recycling. So plastic recycling is not a free. This is in China, in the coast. It's not a free process. It has its own pollution and energy costs. This man made a expose documentary about it. Okay.
What's his name?
I don't remember. Okay, let me move towards what I think we could propose as really meaningful or lasting solutions. Zero waste. This concept really embodies rethinking waste from the roots, like Sona Mongchik was talking about, rather than just moving it around, managing it, burning it, somehow accommodating it, rather preventing it. Okay? So again, ask grandparents, how did you live 50 years ago? And a lot of solutions to the waste problem will come. If you ask any Memele, any Abile in Ladakh, what kind of waste did you have? They'll say, what is waste? We never had such a... Okay, so I think in this kind of order of importance, we can imagine tackling the waste problem. Political actions, local alternatives, public education, and then personal actions. And these are all mutually reinforcing. They all support each other. So it's not any one of them alone, but I actually do think this is roughly the order of importance. So what could we do politically to control this problem? Well, some things can't be done from Ladakh or by the Ladakh government, obviously. But they need to be thought about on a broader national level. For example, re-regulating global trade. If it's true that India being open to companies from everywhere is also connected to this increase of packaged food and waste, then we really need to rethink trade liberalization, right? Subsidies. Why not shift subsidies away from supporting the growth of the plastic industry and away from giving, SEZs for industrial parks to produce more of this, and instead shift those subsidies towards non-waste alternatives. Advertising, of course, we need to control advertising insofar as advertising is connected to the adoption of these values and this consumption of this stuff. Advertising must be controlled. I understand there's actually a law now in India which bans the sale and advertising of junk food around schools, a certain radius around schools. I'm not sure if that's being implemented or... and then policies which really limit or ban the use of these single-use disposable products, like the plastic bag ban we have in Leh, and 80 cities and countries around the world have had similar bans on plastic. You know, California has banned polystyrene and plastic bags because they realize those are the main sources of ocean pollution on their coast. And many other examples could be given. So here's the Women's Alliance. This is some years after the ban that they, with some other groups, initiated here. But they used to go through the Leh Bazaar and enforce the ban. They would raid the shops. So this is one year during World Environment Day, I believe.
When was this actually?
This must have been in 2007 or so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anyone know if they're still doing this?
Ah, still continued.
Yeah?
looking at
Yeah,
it.
okay.
Especially if you
But I just want to throw this in. Okay, while polythene bags are banned in Leh very effectively, these new bags have come in, which look like cloth bags. They're actually cloth look-alike. They're also plastic bags made of polypropylene. Those should also be controlled. In fact, the court in Delhi ruled that these non-woven polypropylene bags should also fall under the bag ban. So we need to think about that, because those are now commonly given by shopkeepers here and becoming waste. So this is the one where I think a lot can and is being done on a local level, creating local alternatives to packaging and waste. The first big one there is obviously strengthening and relocalizing food system, okay? Because we're seeing almost all of the waste is from packaged imported food. So naturally, the converse of that is re-strengthening the local food system and packaging it differently. And it's much easier to reduce waste with local food or eliminate it. And import substitution. You know, every product which is being consumed in Ladakh today, which is part of this global food system, it represents not just waste and a health issue, but an economic loss. This is this leakage of wealth. Every time a bag of Lay's is purchased for 20 rupees, most of that money is leaving Ladakh. So all of those products could be substituted with local production, if you think about. So a lot of livelihood opportunities arise there as well. And some of that is happening. Zero waste shops and also water bottle refilling stations. I'll come to these. Okay, traditional Ladakhi food. Zero waste naturally. There's no packaging needed. Our lunches at this Vikalp Sangam have been the exemplar of zero waste, of unpackaged food, and the most nutritious possible. This is at a local cafe, by the way, which serves these foods in Moti Market. This is something we don't think about much now, but almost everyone is using imported packaged cooking oil, you know, and a lot of this is from Brazil or imported and of questionable quality or related to global ecological problems and packaged in plastic. This is local mustard oil from Hemeshupachan. Okay, it's in a plastic bottle, but it could easily be in glass bottles which could be reused again and again. And this is the most healthy oil. So again, there's an opportunity there to regenerate local oil production. It's gone out of many villages. Many villages no longer produce mustard. That could be regenerated with support from the government. Okay, zero waste shops. Again, this is how everyone shopped here, right? 20, 30 years ago, is it? In open, with your own bags. Of course, this is another exemplary case of a zero waste shop, or pretty close to zero waste, right here in Leh, Zomsa. They've been doing this for decades. And the amount of waste which Zomsa has prevented from being created is tremendous. Unfortunately, the water bottle refilling is not there, but hundreds of thousands, undoubtedly, of tourists have filled their bottles here instead of bought packaged water, preventing millions of bottles of waste. So if we have more of these, okay, and all the products here are locally grown, locally processed, natural stuff in, you know, disposable, this biodegradable or reusable packaging. Of course, this is Bagheera, which we visited yesterday.
So, yeah.
Perfect example of an alternative. I took the picture yesterday. You know, newspaper bags providing livelihood and a perfect alternative to plastic. Rigzin, who's just come, visited a project in Pondicherry, Auroville, where they're establishing these water refilling stations. And he's proposing this as a viable alternative for Leh. See, the Hill Council a few years ago tried to actually ban packaged water, but the alternative wasn't really in place enough. So it failed. It was not supported. So Rigzin, would you like to say anything more about this?
It's a water vending, they call it water vending machine. So you have some tokens, you can buy some tokens and put the coin and you get a glass of water. So it is purified in the machine itself. Yeah.
This is called the water ATMs, no?
Water ATM
Yeah,
kind
but I
of
think
thing.
we have to discuss this out a bit,
Then
whether we are
there is
suggesting
a
as a
20 liter
solution.
bottle and that can be replaced by just the ordinary water and it gets purified by the machine. So if it is available here, I mean, this could be one of the alternatives. I'm not saying this is the only alternative. But
Yeah. This is in Thailand, a similar system. If you go to Thailand, all over Bangkok, everywhere, they have these, which doesn't mean there's not a lot of plastic waste in Thailand by any means, but this, again, is an alternative. The next thing I wanted to just mention briefly is the importance of public education. So we can make policy changes, we can institute alternatives locally. We also do need to complement that with public education and outreach about the plastic problem, about alternatives, about the importance of local organic food. So, you know, for years we've been harassing tourists here with this message. I don't know how effective we've been, but hopefully we've sent a lot of people to Zom, so that's for sure. This is a meeting I was in Chandigarh a few years ago, a zero waste meeting, walking around the rock garden with this poster, and people stunned to see something. This is at a school in Dharamshala, teaching the young generation about alternatives to packaged food. Right? Again, in Himachal, going door to door, talking to neighbors about this issue, making this a public issue. Of course, there's lots of personal actions we can all take, and I'm sure most of us already are, but we need to encourage these, again, not as a substitute, but as a complement to policy change. I actually think if we change the structure, the situation, so that packaging is less available to begin with, we have to do less of this as individuals. Because this really, if we only do this, we accept a system of packaging, which is very hard to avoid, and then blame individuals for not avoiding it. So I think it needs to be the other way around. First we change the, well, maybe not first, but importantly we address the structure. But a lot of these things, right? Home composting, carrying your bags, buying stuff in bulk, refilling your bottle. Even in Delhi, you know, in the city now, this is becoming popular. Composting in these daily dump, this clay composter, and very effective. But in a place like Himachal or here, or rural places, no need for that even. Like Angchuk was saying, if you have cows, to have food waste and cows is absurd. You shouldn't have that situation. But if we walk out of Ledeg, down the road, just here, there's a dumpster. Every morning you'll see food waste in there, along with plastic, from the restaurants. That should be stopped. Supporting local crafts. This is one of the last potters in Ladakh, Ajang Sepel, from Likir. He's in high demand because he's one of the few who does it. But all these articles from local clay, you know, and completely biodegradable. If one of these pots breaks, you throw it out the door and it's fine. If a plastic thing breaks, not the same. So just to sum up again, I feel like we need to tackle this problem really requires preventing the emergence of waste rather than treating it. It requires all these government policy changes, especially subsidy shifts. It requires taking action against the power of these handful of 10 companies who are flooding the world with unhealthy packaged products. Reclaiming, if we have an autonomous hill council, we should also have economic autonomy, you know, which means local economy, local products. Zero waste. If you talk about zero waste today, people think you might be absolutely idealistic. But recall, 50 years ago, zero waste was the norm. So we can return to that. And final point, the health issue, health problems, and the waste problem can be simultaneously solved by taking these steps. So by doing what we need to do to reduce packaging, we also improve public health outcomes. So thank you.
Good.